From the ancient Tatul to the even more ancient Magura Cave, which began its formation 15 million years ago, the territory of Bulgaria holds secrets that very few people in the world know about. In this video, we follow in the footsteps of our ancient ancestors as we explore the structures they built and the drawings they left behind more than 9,000 years ago, a time millennia before Sumerian civilization and the pyramids of Egypt, a time when an unknown society thrived in the lands of today's Bulgaria. Tatul is a rock cult complex near the village of Tatul, Momchilgrad Municipality, Bulgaria. It is a prehistoric cult site on the territory of which is located one of the most striking megalithic monuments on the territory of Bulgaria. 2 sarcophagi and a truncated pyramid have been found there, which have no analogue among the many megalithic monuments recorded by archaeologists around the world. Tatul is the best preserved temple complex carved into a monolithic piece of rock, again in the whole world. The first archaeoastronomical studies of the site were carried out between 1981 and 1987 by Professor Nikola Nikolov, Slavej Zlatev and Kalina Vasilyeva, and the results were published later in the magazine Archaeology. It was from this moment that the mystery surrounding the site began to unravel. Scientists observed a trough at the southern foot of the truncated pyramid, oriented in an east-west direction. It is about 8 feet and 20 inches long and about 3 feet and 30 inches wide at its ends. It tapers in the middle and horizontally resembles an X sign, at the intersection of which is formed a vertical slot 20 to 25 inches wide and 127 inches deep. The so-called mushka is aimed at the sunrise dancing with its lower edge on the horizon at the equinox. The great axis of the sarcophagus from the uppermost platform on the roof of the truncated pyramid is directed towards the sunrise at the winter solstice. At the same time, thrones were found on the site, which are supposed to be observation points for the near and far horizons. Meteorological and physical studies were conducted at the site during archaeoastronomical investigations in 1982 and 1983, which established the presence of a depression in the geomagnetic field. Measurements of the rock and air temperature have shown that just before sunrise, its temperature drops sharply, and afterward it gradually rises. The cause of these phenomena is probably an anomaly in the structure or composition of the rock mass itself. A detailed geophysical study of these anomalies has not been carried out. It is assumed that these anomalies were a factor for the ancients in choosing the sanctuary site. But how they knew this thousands of years ago, and what the strange anomalous field on the rock was for, still remains one of the greatest mysteries. Based on scientific articles and monographs from the excavations, the official conclusion is that life near Tatul began at the beginning of the 4th millennium BCE. This is the opinion of the Stone Age specialist Professor Dr. Yavor Boyagiev, consultant of the excavations of Tatul and Perperikon. However, the distinguished Professor Anna Raduncheva does not agree with this dating at all. She has spent much of her career studying in detail the rock sanctuaries on the territory of the Rhodope Mountains, and according to her, there is undeniable evidence that they were built and actively used as early as the Neolithic Age, towards the end of the 7th and the beginning of the 6th millennium BC. According to her, it was during this period that settlers here in this region established the earliest settlements in the plains, and higher up in the mountains built their rock sanctuaries. These sanctuaries, according to Raduncheva, gradually turned into real sacred complexes, for whose architectural layout the ancient people used the natural forms of rocks and niches, or elaborated them to turn them into impressive rock sanctuaries where they performed ritual acts. The eastern Rhodopes have the largest concentration of sacred rock sites. According to Raduncheva, the proximity between the prehistoric sanctuaries in the Rhodopes makes them a giant altar for the worship of the gods of the supreme prehistoric pantheon and the mountain sacred. The professor defends the thesis that the ancient settlers also used the complexes as a kind of astronomical observatory and knew the celestial bodies and the location of the stars, which were their landmarks. During archaeological expeditions to sites in the eastern Rhodopes, led by Raduncheva, her colleagues have come across the second, the so-called ancient Thracian layer of walls, in which the images of the old deities were walled up and the rooms were rebuilt or filled with earth and stones. This is precisely why she calls the rock sanctuaries in the eastern Rhodopes prehistoric, and stresses that it is historically incorrect to associate them only with the culture of the ancient Thracians. Raduncheva points out that these prehistoric settlers developed over 150 gold mines in the eastern Rhodopes and created the oldest and most brilliant European civilization, which could be characterized as the golden age of human history. The fragments of ceramic objects found on the territory of the complexes in the eastern Rhodopes unequivocally indicate their very early origin, somewhere around the end of the 7th millennium BC. These earliest traces find confirmation in the pottery idols, and they have an exact parallel with similar ones in Asia Minor, specifically in Çatalhöyük, the Holy City, as the famous English archaeologist Professor James Mallard. There are also similar rock structures and images found in Spain and Italy, but nowhere is this culture as developed as in the Balkans, according to Raduncheva. Is it possible that this ideology started in the present-day Bulgarian lands, and that is why there is such a wealth of artifacts and such well-preserved traces here? One of the speculations about Tatul is that this is the final resting place of the famous priest-king, singer and seer, Orpheus. But even if that is so, then whose is the second sarcophagus on the mountaintop? Interestingly, the sanctuary is a rock massif whose top ends in a truncated pyramid. However, the dating of the site is much more ancient than that of the pyramids in Egypt. Is it possible that the civilization that lived here knew that it subsequently carried far away? The Tatul complex consists, besides the pyramid and the two sarcophagi, of a quadrangular bed for the main altar, a 3-meter well, and numerous carvings in the rocks, the purpose of which is unknown to us today. In the 1980s, Professor Ivan Venedikov advanced the theory that the hill near the village of Tatul served as a sanctuary dedicated to Orpheus. Venedikov cited several ancient sources for the ancient story. According to Konon and Pausanias, the remains of the legendary Thracian priest Orpheus were placed in an urn and laid on a rock. The idea was that after his death he would remain a mediator between the gods and the people. The bones were to be both hidden from the sun, but also closest to it. This is the idea of the demigod king, who after his death gradually became a deity. According to Venedikov, a funerary rite was performed on the hill near Tatul, which was quite different from the known funerary practices of the ancient Thracians, in which the burial of the deceased rulers was observed under mound embankments. Professor Valeria Fall and many of her colleagues are strongly opposed to this categorization. According to her, declaring the sarcophagus at the top of the hill to be the tomb of Orpheus is ridiculous, because Orpheus is a mythological image in which the Thracian kings, priests, are encoded. Therefore, it is an aggregate mythological image. Associate Professor Kostadin Rabadzhiev, former head of the Department of Archaeology at Sofia University, is a bit more extreme and states that the thesis is the fruit of a straw man of false facts and scientific incompetence. Bulgaria has a huge concentration of rock sanctuaries created by our ancestors, but what we are about to tell you about may predate many of the similar structures around the world. Cave paintings from the Epipaleolithic, Late Neolithic, Eneolithic, and Early Bronze Age decorate some of the walls of Magura Cave. It is estimated that some of the paintings were created around 11,000 years ago. They represent important events in the life of the society that inhabited the cave, such as religious ceremonies, hunting scenes, and depictions of deities. These drawings are recognized as unique worldwide. The formation of the Magura began about 15 million years ago, and the galleries discovered so far total 8,200 feet long and 183 feet deep. The cave has a constant temperature of 53 degrees Fahrenheit. It was discovered 11 miles from Belogradchik, Bulgaria, more than 100 years ago in 1921 by Bulgarian archaeologist Raphael Popov. Undoubtedly, the records left by our ancient ancestors in the cave are a find of worldwide significance. One of the galleries, with the most ancient of them, is supposed to have been something of a repository of knowledge. The knowledge of the people of those times is represented in this room in the form of drawings, and later others went there to learn from what was recorded. One group of Bronze Age drawings has been interpreted as a solar calendar. According to Alexei Stoev and Penka Stoeva, the drawings of staggered black and white squares used to count the days in the calendar month make it possible to describe relatively accurately the number of days in the solar year. The cave paintings preserve information on the regional solar calendar, customs, religious festivals, and rituals of the community. This is the earliest such representation of such information found so far in Europe, and perhaps in the world. An interesting feature is that the women are painted with greater stature than the men. Presumably, this is due to the fact that these were times of matriarchy. It is impossible to describe all the richness and abundance of images bequeathed to us from different eras. Generally speaking, these are dancing female and male figures, men who hunt and those who are masked, and even those who participate in rituals that are incomprehensible to us. Drawings abound of a crowd of people, animals, geometric figures, and depictions of constellations and the sun. And though created more than 10,000 years ago, and by means of bat guano, even today they are still as vivid and contrasting. One of the niches of the Sun Hall, however, holds a secret that raises many questions, but to this day there are no answers. Quite different images from the others have been found there. Several pear-shaped bodies with elongated arms, necks, and rhomboid heads are painted on the rock. At the top of the drawing, there is an orb-shaped body that closely resembles a flying object. Could our ancient ancestors have immortalized their encounter with aliens from outer space? This remains another unsolved mystery. In summary, the painted signs can be organized into 4 thematic groups: anthropomorphic, zoomorphic, geometric, and astronomical. When we connect some of the figures, we get scenes captured as if in a photograph. These are mainly moments of dancing, hunting, or mating. In the so-called cult hall, a large horizontal dance and hunting scene is depicted, arranged in 2 main rows. These are the most famous and most reproduced images from the Magura Cave. Unfortunately, most of the things the ancient ancestors wanted to tell us are still incomprehensible to us today. We can only hope that we are not missing a message that could change our lives for the better or save us from an unexpected catastrophe. Bulgarian territory holds many more secrets and many more pre-fossil structures that housed some of the earliest flourishing civilizations that the world is only now learning about. From structures already dozens of miles out to sea to those that tower at some of the highest points on the landform, the hidden legacy of our ancient ancestors is just beginning to show. To find out more about it, watch this video about pre-flood structures in Bulgaria and pre-flood civilization. Click the video on the screen to continue the story.